obviously not nuts enough to think that you can do your planning without MasterMine. I will let Rob Makalak, our presenter today, go ahead and get started. Get cracking, Rob.
All right. Thank you so much, Carnegie. Welcome, everybody. Our October webinar, as you know, is about planning for next year, and our aim here, of course, is to help you to make better use of the tools that you've got on hand there for managing your business by using, well, essentially to harness the data that you have in GoldMine toward that planning objective. So let's jump right in here. I'm gonna talk a little bit. Mostly my conversation today is going to be centered around goals and budgeting. What you do as far as planning for the next year obviously might involve things beyond that, but those are the kind of the areas that I've chosen for today. Before we're done here, I really want to take questions or have your comments, and you can put those into the question dialog in the GoToWebinar dialog on the right-hand side of your screen there. If you are not using it at the moment, of course, you can retract it by hitting that little button, the little orange rectangle with the arrow in it, to retract that off to the side and get it out of the way. But do feel free to kind of pull that out once in a while and throw a question up or a comment, and we will try to incorporate those as we go along here. So let's go ahead with our agenda for today. So this is the agenda that I want to cover today, and I'm going to try to get through this in about an hour. As you know, we sort of do these every month, so they're all one-off things. That they're not tightly choreographed, but I try to give you as much useful information as I can in the time that's available. We will be talking first about, as I said, about applying the tools, the MasterMine tools, and the GoldMine and the GoldMine data toward the effort to put together good goals for 2015, as well as talk about budgeting and what it takes really to accomplish that. And what I want to do is talk also just about specific planning needs. What do you have to have in place in order to do that that goal setting and that budget creation in practice? And then we'll go into some specific examples that I've sort of pulled together from our trusty old demo database here. So to start with, let's just talk about these two areas that I mentioned. Okay, so when I talk about goals obviously are distinct from budgets. Goals typically are, if you're an individual, you may have income goals, of course, but within that, thinking about yourself in relationship to the overall company, what you're really aiming at here is to create goals that are measurable achievements that you can accomplish in whatever time period that you're talking about. And specifically, I'm going to talk about two different kinds of goals. There are the sorts of goals that you accomplish one time. I want to make $100,000 next year, and I want to sell 50 new customers. Well, okay, those are what I would call one-time accomplishments. In other words, you have a starting point, an ending point, and at the end you'll know whether or not you've accomplished those. And then there's process improvement kinds of achievements. Process improvement to me means every month I aim to accomplish a little bit more than I did the month before that. And in order to accomplish that, I need to compare myself over time with what I've done in the past. Both of those, of course, are very important kinds of measurements, and they're sort of measurements that you need to apply reporting, analytics, basically your MasterMine capabilities to, so that you are driving yourself toward the accomplishment of those achievements, and you know exactly how far along you are towards those accomplishments. So goals, I'm going to say, apply certainly to cash or income goals, but they also apply to the actual day-to-day sorts of activities that you do in pursuit of that. And then with budgeting, what I'm going to suggest here is I'm just going to talk about budgeting actually fairly in a coarse sense. Your budget, whether it's your personal individual budget, your departmental budget, or your company-wide budget, is going to involve really two main areas, revenue and expenses. And the revenue, of course, is what do we expect to sell? And it is hopefully something of a stretch. It means if we do everything right, we will actually accomplish this set of dollar revenues for the coming year. And you drive your expenses, your expenses hopefully, presumably, are driven by the revenue by way of what is the activity that needs to happen in order to accomplish that revenue. So what I've done here is sort of kind of schematically laid that out here. So of course I've got the dollar budget that I expect to hit next year. I will need to do certain activity, accomplish certain activity. Again, this might be just one person individually, or it might be the in a broader sense the activity in terms of customer service, in terms of sales outreach, in terms of attending trade shows, all the other activities that you do to accomplish that revenue. And that activity, accomplishing that activity sort of secondarily is driven or is going to drive what are the personnel and resources that we need to bring to bear. In other words, what are the expenses in terms of personnel and resources that we need to bring to bear in order to accomplish that activity, in order to accomplish getting that revenue. So in a really simplified sense, that's what I'm talking about when I say doing your budgeting for next year. Now everybody, or I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of organizations, most of them, have some sort of a budgeting process that happens toward the end of your fiscal year. You may not be toward the end of your fiscal year, but I'm assuming that most of the people on this call are. That means here in the last quarter of the previous year, you're not only assessing what did we accomplish this year, but in part based on experience, based on trends, based on understanding what is actually happening in the company, what can we reasonably budget for next year in terms of revenue, but really based on what sort of activity do we think that we can generate from the personnel and resources we have available to us and the market share or the market that we expect to be able to reach in order to generate the revenue that we expect to get. Okay, so those are the planning areas that we're going to cover here, and what I want to talk about here is how you get to that initially. How do you get to your budget and your goals for the next year? And here's where the subject of our webinar today actually came up. We were thinking, okay, people are reaching the end of their year out there. They are hopefully starting to get into a position where they can reassess how have we done from January through October. Are we improving? Are we getting worse? If you're on a seasonal, cyclical kind of a year, it may look a little bit different to you. But if you are just simply trying to assess what have we done through our year, and what does that tell us about what we can and should accomplish in the future, you're going to bring that to bear in several different ways. The information that's available to you is, you certainly have feelings and impressions. You have your sort of wishful thinking. You have your understanding, your anecdotal evidence that you just sort of collect on a day-to-day basis as you are doing your work. But what I'm going to suggest is, as you get farther down toward the end of that list there, you are getting more and more in touch with actual reality as opposed to just simply what's floating around in your head. And when we conceived this webinar, we thought, here people have GoldMine. They've got actually within GoldMine typically, and your accounting system probably, and your ERP system, you have information, you have data, you have hard facts which you could bring to bear on your budgeting or your goal setting process. But all too often people simply don't do it because they haven't put one and two together. They haven't put the data together with the tools that are necessary to make the data become information that's useful. And which is why we kind of put in our sort of joking headline in there, are you nuts? You've got MasterMine, you've got GoldMine, you should be putting the two of them together to actually get the evidence, get some hard facts together that back your budgeting process and back your goal setting. I'm going to suggest that we are not all really good at bringing that statistical evidence to bear here, and in fact, what I would like to do is put up a little poll here. I'm going to do two polls here. I'm going to ask you two questions, and the first one is coming up on your screen right now. And what I'm going to ask you to do as the attendees here is make a choice here. How solid is your goals? Is your actual goal-setting process? And I don't mean the one that you aspire to, but your actual real one. In other words, within your organization, you can choose just your department or your organization overall. Choose how do you actually do your goal setting? Are the goals simply left to the individuals and you just expect everybody to do a good job? Do you have actually general goals that are agreed upon and understood but are not necessarily formal within the organization? Do you actually have a formalized goal setting process where you set the specific goals, everybody knows what their goals are, but you don't necessarily monitor the actual activity toward achieving those goals? And here I don't mean just simply making money. I'm talking about the actual sub-parts of the job, figuring out the activity that you do. Or finally, do you really have a very good specific goal setting process where you've got measurement all along, you know exactly how everybody's doing, and you're actually making adjustments as you go along through the year to so that you are actually bringing your activity in line with the final goals that you want to accomplish, and therefore the revenue, let's say, that you budgeted for or that you have as a goal. So we've got, it looks like most of the attendees have voted, not quite all of them yet. I'm assuming that since we just started the webinar, I'm hoping that you're still paying attention. Click one of those options there, and then I'm going to actually close the poll here. I will go ahead and do that. Let's close this poll and give you what the results are. So if you have not fully engaged your measurement and doing adjustments in your goal setting, you are not alone. Something less than a third of our attendees today feel that they've really got specific goals. They're doing the measurement. They're doing the adjustments. I hope that you're making good use of your MasterMine to turn that GoldMine information into useful, goal setting and budgeting information. But some of you are actually a little bit short of that in terms of actually accomplishing it. And that's, not at all uncommon. Good to see we didn't have anybody who actually said, what, we just sort of float along, we leave the individuals to set goals, and we just hope they'll do a good job. I actually do see that, in practice. Now, this is self-reporting. In practice out there in the world, all too often, that first option is the one that people are doing. Now, I'm going to actually move on to a second poll here right away, and this is the last one I'm going to do in this section anyway, and talk about your budgeting. So speaking of how your budgeting was done last year for this year, did your budget actually reflect, if we go all the way down to the bottom there, do you really have a thorough understanding of your data? Or, starting at the top, was it really based on guesswork and sort of anecdotal evidence, figuring out what should we be able to do and maybe just making a prediction? Was there also kind of an element of, really logically we should make this much because that's here's what's available to us in the market, but maybe not based on actual past or on actual hard numbers from the past before that. Third would be, did we really just kind of punt on our budget, take the previous year's numbers, adjust them by, a certain percentage, and then put them out there, which is all too often how budgeting kind of is done when people are, busy toward the end of their calendar year and don't really feel like they've got time to do very much deep thinking about what are they going to do differently next year. Then oftentimes that's what's happened. We'll punt, we'll take last year's numbers, adjust them, and we think we'll do just fine. And of course, the next option is a thorough understanding of your data. How much did you really dig into your GoldMine data last year in order to set your goals and your budgeting? And then maybe another other would mean we really don't fit in any of those categories. Most of you have voted, about 2/3 of you have voted. We got one of our users who suggested, well, we just use the swag method. That would be scientific wild guessing. And oftentimes, of course, we see that out in the world too. I kind of tend to place that under the logic plus wishful thinking way of budgeting. Okay, we've got all of our voters, all of our attendees in, so we'll close this one. This one I find kind of interesting. So the results look like this. Nobody felt that it was pure guesswork as far as how the budgeting went, but there is a certain amount of let's say less than scientific approach to creating the goals and the goals and the budget for the year. And here's what I'm going to suggest. Actually, what I'm going to suggest is this. goal setting and budgeting is not just simply that you do the ideal and go right for the statistical evidence. I really think that both goal setting and budgeting is both an art and a science. And the science part of it actually feeds the art. By that I mean, yeah, you can make some guesses, based on seat of the pants or anecdotal evidence, but really, even once you dive into the statistical evidence, even when you get into the actual numbers, what did we actually do this year versus our goals, from the previous year or so on, there is an art to going into that data and figuring out how ought this all really fit together, so that we can do some sensible planning for next year. And I'm going to suggest that there is both. I'm going to try to illustrate that here in the process here. So thank you all for doing that poll with me. Before we actually go into talking about the actual application, I do want to suggest this one more set of things to just think about as we think about this. Requirements. You can't just simply dive into your GoldMine database as is necessarily unless you've really been using it thoroughly, unless you've really had a consistent process that yields up good data. I'm going to suggest that you need to have accurate database information, but I'm going to say accurate data in your database so that you can turn it into orderly, meaningful information. And of course that doesn't mean 100% accurate, but the first step is always going to be, well, let's look and see what we have in the data first before we try to form it into useful logical information for us to work with. And of course, your MasterMine tools are going to help you to do that. The reports will show you what you've got. Updater will help you to actually make some of the things that are not accurate be accurate if it's relatively an easy short step between, oh, let's identify or we may be able to tell from the way our data is right now what it looks like, how many let's say from the data on the top of the screen, how many companies did we actually contact this year, or maybe more importantly, which companies did we actually contact this year. But if we dig into the data a little bit in the history, we may actually be able to derive more of them. When did we contact them? What months? When was the last month that we actually had a good contact with them? We can actually, in other words, do a little bit of massaging with the data to make that information rise up to the surface and be more useful for us, more meaningful. So I'm going to suggest that making the database more accurate is step one. Step two is make sure that you have your processes so that along the way, as people are making those calls, completing the appointments, completing the calls in GoldMine, that they know exactly what their process is for putting that information into GoldMine so that later on a whole bunch of cleanup isn't actually necessary, or somewhat less cleanup is actually necessary, and your information is more accurate. Why is more accurate information in GoldMine more useful? I think that's fairly obvious, but the more accurate it is, the more it's going to helpfully inform your goal setting and your budget and your budgeting. And then finally, of course, there's the actual creation of the reports and the monitoring devices that you're going to use to keep track along the way of what is actually happening in the real world. You have what I would call repeating reports, your monthly or weekly sales forecast, and maybe sales completed report, which you can archive, go back to, and look at from same month previous year, or month to month through the year to see how we're trending and so on. There's those repeating reports, and hopefully those also get reduced a little bit to dashboards. And by dashboards I mean not just the built-in GoldMine dashboards, but also MasterMine reports that are graphically set up to quickly give you at-a-glance information. I'll talk about that here a little bit in the examples. And then of course there's the one-off reports, and this is the part that I think oftentimes gets shortchanged. We have lots of customers who have created MasterMine reports that they open and refresh periodically, every week, every month, whatever it is, and look and see what they've got. But they may not also be thinking creatively, and here's where that art comes in again. They may not be thinking creatively about how do I engage with my GoldMine data so that I really derive useful information. The repeating reports are fairly obvious, the sort of standard forecast sale report, but what are the ways that in the specific context of your business can you ask questions and get the answers on the fly that will get you that sort of one-time answer that tells you, oh, here's how we did that on reaching out to our most likely prospects this year. First determine, okay, what are the most likely prospects? How can I tell from my GoldMine data that we did or didn't actually reach out to them? How can I tell further that reach out, or to what degree that reach out to them actually resulted, or outreach to them actually resulted in real contacts happening? And then maybe a fourth step would be, what are the actual sales that derive from that? These are all creative questions that you can ask your GoldMine database, do some analysis, get some one-off reports that give you the answers that really give you some insight into what has happened in the past in order to inform your actual activity, your planning and your goaling, your setting of goals for activity. Okay, so with that, let's switch over to some actual data here, and I think this is going to be the one. This is going to be, again, our favorite demo database here. And I want to go into a number of examples here that really address the kinds of things that we talked about that would back up or be informative to your goal setting and your budgeting process. Before I do, I'm going to quickly just check, see if we've got any questions on the dialogue. We do not. Okay. Feel free, as I said before, to pull out the dialogue and ask some questions and reply them. Let's go to some actual reports here. Now, my aim here is to talk about creating reports, because I wanted to, in this session, really run through start to finish, creating a couple of reports and applying them in this goal setting or budgeting process. So I thought I would really do two reports to start with here. I'm open to any suggestions that you have if you want me to kind of add these kinds of reports toward the end of the presentation here. So as you think about them, or any questions that you have, do feel free to put those into the question dialogue. So I thought I would start with a pretty straightforward report of pending and completed sales for the year. Now, why pending and completed sales? This is October. We've not yet obviously completed 2014. We've got sales in the bag, so far for the year, and plus we've got forecast for the rest of the year. And the two of them, if we've been sort of dynamically working with our GoldMine data along through the year, our sales reps should have been scheduling pending sales in GoldMine and completing them. Now, you all may not use the actual sales tracking capability inside of GoldMine. That's why I'm actually going to do some sort of secondary report here that looks also at just calling activity and appointment activity. But again, I want to encourage you to sort of shape this in a way that's useful to you. If I don't happen to cover your way of doing things in GoldMine here, either try to extrapolate it from what I talk about here, or you can give us a call too, and we can discuss what you're doing further. That might very well lead to our wanting to do some reports directly in your own database with you, and that could be very useful for you in your planning. So with all that said, I will just start us off here with an overall sales document that shows our pending and completed sales. And so that's what I've done here. I've checked pending and history. Hopefully you realize that you can do the two of them simultaneously in a single report. That's a really big benefit of MasterMine, by the way, that's very hard to derive using other reporting methods. There's certainly nothing built into GoldMine that gives you this sort of thing. So with pending and history chosen and with sale, I'm going to go ahead. I'm too fancy with other fields here. I'm just going to take our default fields that are checked on, when you go to create the report. I'm going to bring pending and completed sales out into GoldMine and really, or out of GoldMine into Excel, and I'm really going to kind of focus on the current year. Now, you probably saw when I created this, I actually pulled all the data since the beginning of time. But within my report here, I'm just looking at 2014. Now, to start with, I'm going to open this up because I want to do a little bit of cleanup, and this is going to illustrate a little bit for you as well. I'm going to change this to say all years. And within showing you all years here, let's look at what the default layout here is for the MasterMine report. So we're showing columns of pending, successful, and unsuccessful. Those are the three possible statuses of your sales. Now this is when we're talking about just forecast sales in GoldMine, not the full opportunities. If you wanted to get into opportunities, we of course could do that. I'll answer whatever questions you have or things that you're interested in seeing about that later on. We've also taken the product field. Now this is the reference line of your sale records, of your pending and completed sale records in GoldMine. Pending, obviously on the pending tab, completed being on the history tab, and they fall into certain categories here. Now in your own case, if you're doing pending and completed, you're probably using that reference line in some way. You may be using it in a similar way like this. These ones up here, by the way, these ones that say document with a document number, those are all sales that would be handled, let's say, through QuoteWorks, which actually has quote documents and assigns them and puts the information into the product line of your pending sale in GoldMine. I'm going to set those aside, and I'm actually going to do three categories here. I'm going to do ones that are handled through QuoteWorks, which I will just call other products, ones that are gadgets, and ones that are widgets. So those are our three different categories of information. Now, partly what I want to do is illustrate the use of the pivot table to do this and the tools in MasterMine. So I'm going to take our products and I'm going to actually group them into those three areas that I just mentioned. I'm going to use the Tools menu up here. I'm going to hit Group Selected Items. I've highlighted I started out by highlighting all these ones that have QuoteWorks documents. I'm just going to call these other products. We ran them. Let's just sort of say, for the purposes of this demo database, we ran certain kinds of our sales through QuoteWorks, and some of them we don't run through QuoteWorks. So we're going to group those all together as having a single meaning. We'll also take our gadgets here, group those. And by the way, yours may not. If you've been using your reference line in a little bit messier way than I've got here, and yet you still can tell from the contents of that field, from somewhere in the reference line, oh, that that widgets were being sold. That's fine. You could even before you group all these, you could go and select the field here and have it actually just seek out all the product, all the pending or completed sales that just mention the word, let's say, widget in the product field, and I'll put an S at the end of that one, and have it actually search down through that field and find all the occurrences of the word widget in there, just for the purpose of pulling those all together into a single item that you can work with in your report. And now, having done that, you'll see where we've come to is a considerably simpler view. I just pulled out the specific products and just left our product categories out here. I've come down to a considerably simpler view of what our year looks like. Whoops, sorry, that's right. I've still got all years showing here, but let's just go to the 2014. Okay, so for the year 2014, I've still got this much pending in terms of dollars, this much in terms of successful completed sales, and then we've got our lost sales. Now, there's lots of ways of doing analysis here on the lost sales, of course. I've had people ask, how can we track things in GoldMine so we can tell, what stage of the sale were they in at the time we lost the sale. We can certainly track that way. Or maybe something more statistical, like what is our close ratio? Well, to know what your close ratio is, you're going to need to keep track of not only what did you actually sell, but what did you quote and lose, and those might be the ones that you consider unsuccessful. So how you store the data on the GoldMine side, of course, dictates very strongly what you can accomplish in terms of analysis and reporting here. So, think, and that gets back to what I was saying about having a process, about thinking through your process in advance so that you actually do have people recording the information in an appropriate way in GoldMine so that you can do meaningful reporting at the end. If you need any advice about how to do this, that's partly what we do. We provide not only the tools for doing the reporting, we provide some counsel, some advice as far as how best to use GoldMine so that your information feeds into meaningful reports for you at the end. So, let us know if we can help. In this case, I'm going to turn off the unsuccessful ones because I'm mainly interested in what's still pending and what have we completed, what's won or lost, in other words, or excuse me, what's won or still open. By the way, you can change these labels any way that you want to. Here's another just kind of a tech tip here. If rather than pending, successful, and unsuccessful, you want this to actually say open, won, and lost, it's very easy to just simply type over the value that's already in that field. Open, won, lost, and having done that, that has a permanent effect on this report that we're looking at. So if I go down here and look for example, in the drop-down for the success field, we actually see open, won, and lost, where it used to say the other three possible values in here. And no matter how we move around the report from here on out, those will be the actual meanings that we cover. Now, I was going to say I want to hide the lost ones and just leave me showing the open and won ones. So here we have a very simple view of our year. It's the complete year, year to date, really, all in one view. I'm going to take our other products and put them at the bottom here just because it looks nicer. Again, by the way, let me undo that technical way of handling this that people often forget. Things don't have to show up alphabetically in here. They can show up alphabetically lowest to highest, highest to lowest. They could actually be in order of the dollar amount over here on the right so that we could actually have it descending from the highest amount. In this case, what I did was I chose to actually manually sort what order these are in. I'm dragging other products down to the bottom. Maybe we'll put our gadgets before our widgets. And what I'm doing is I'm putting the mouse on the edge of the selected item within that field and just dragging it to the location that I want it. Okay, so we've got open and won for the year, but let's look at this in terms of a planning budgeting document. Probably I want to know, well, how does that break out month by month through the year? Very simple question to answer. We drag our on month field in. Now on month is the date that actually the month that the sale is either scheduled to happen or was actually completed. And when I drag it in here, I'm going to drop it above open and won rather than below it. Actually, I'll do below it just so you can sort of see what that would look like. This would be our still open sales, and these would be our actually completed sales. In this case, I actually want to do it the other way around. I want the month to be above that so that within each month we can sort of tell where we are and what we've got. So total sales for the year that we are forecasting. Now this includes, of course, both still forecast as well as completed sales. Total $2,753,000. We have a month-by-month breakdown here, and you can see January, February, March. These are all closed months, so presumably we should only be showing sales that have been won in each one of those months. But within June, we've actually got some open sales still hiding out there. I'm going to get at cleaning up the data here in order to have sensible reports. You can sort of see where I'm going with that. But then we've got, toward the end of the year, we've got still just in July and August, past months, but in September we've still got some open ones hanging out there. In October, some open ones. This is probably not too different from how your database would look if you were to run a report similar to this one. You would still have some stragglers out there, some things from earlier months that need to be dealt with. You might actually from there, and here I'm going to go a little bit beyond the planning thing, but just back to, well, okay, we've got some, in the course of doing our planning, we're going to learn some things that need to get fixed. You might drill down here, for example, and find out, okay, well, there's just a single sale out there that's still hanging out there. It's to Jerry West at the Los Angeles Lakers, and it's dated back in June. I might go and talk with a sales rep and figure out, well, should this actually have been closed? Was this a lost sale? Was this is this something that's really not going to happen until later? So we might very well do something like this. Drill down to the actual activity. This is on the MasterMine drill down menu. Hit edit activity for the one that we had selected and actually change this. You know what, this sale really should be happening. It's still hanging out there, but we think it's going to happen in November. Okay, set a new date for it, hit OK. Our database is updated. Now we can go back to our report, to the pivot table here, hit refresh, and lo and behold, June now only has 1 sales in it, and as well as July and August. And we'll probably want to wind up doing that, something similar to that with our September sales as well. But the idea is this gives us an actual kind of a reasonable cash flow for 2014 that gives me both the actuals for the past and the projected for the future. In fact, you might even go in here and rename the tab cash flow, and save that report, come back and look at it. You might archive a copy of this. Another tool in the MasterMine toolbar for saving this information, archive or snapshot. Today's October 16th, but you might very well keep a report like this, and this kind of touches on the dashboard idea as well as the archiving. You might very well keep a report like this that every month, at the end of the month, you actually do a snapshot. Where were you on January 31st, on February 28th, on March 30th, 30th or 31st, whichever way that works for March. And doing that within this workbook would be very easy. If you just came in here on January 31st and hit snapshot and said, okay, let's do this snapshot within the same workbook, and it will timestamp automatically at the same time. You hit okay. It takes this sheet, your cash flow sheet, timestamps it, saves it, no longer refreshable. There's no buttons in here that you can manipulate. You just simply got a nice archive of that on that date. So you might very well have a single cash flow report similar to the one that I've built here that contains both a refreshable pivot table as well as each month's outcomes, January, February, March, April, May, June. So you actually see how did that develop over the year. That may turn out to be a useful way for you to actually review the year and understand what you've got. Now, I'm kind of throwing as many tricks in here as possible so that you can sort of learn functionality as well as the context, do the context of planning. Let's look at, I'm going to do one more thing with this, and then I want to go back and look at activities. Actually, no, there's 2 things I want to do with this. One is I want to drill through and talk about the detail that's under it, and then I want to do a little graphical version of this. So the drill through part of it is, we may be looking at September, and here's all the ones that are still open in September. Somebody needs to deal with those. Well, we might deal with those on a sales rep by sales rep basis. I would expect that's kind of the likely way that you would do it. So we might drag in, let's say, the user ID up here so that we can talk with Lori about her forecasts that still are showing, that are still open for September, and then talk with Nancy about her open ones, and so on. So do these sales rep by sales rep. You might also, for sort of a simpler version, just drag that user ID field down in here so you can see, well, who all's got something in September and who doesn't, and move on from there. Do what's necessary with the information that you find out there. By the way, what I'm going to suggest is, I'm going to actually back up on myself a little bit. Here's how that cash flow document looked before I pulled in user ID and started manipulating that. I would suggest that when you have a report like this, especially if it's one that you're planning to sort of keep over the course of the year with your archive sheets within it, save that and do a save as to use for other purposes. Go out, do file, save as. When you save a MasterMine report for reuse a different way, always continue to use the XLSM type report. That keeps your MasterMine activity or your MasterMine connections active. But you may completely rename this report and call this past due sales, because we're going to use it for the purposes of analyzing past due sales. Then when you hit the save button, you've not only well, you've saved this with a new name here, and you can go and rename things and do other stuff with it. But hopefully, before you did that, you also hit the save button on the previous version of it, so that you go back and have your cash flow report as well. I'm going to pause here for just a second because I see that there are a couple things that come up on questions. Carnegie, are you on top of questions there? Is there anything I need to respond to?
There may be. I wanted you to take a look at this one, but it might be more towards the activity portion of this,
okay.
Of the webinar. Do you want to read it, or would you like me to read it out loud to you?
You're talking about the long one that's in there? Okay.
Yeah, it's a few parts.
Okay. I'm going to talk about that toward the end, I think. So the question here says, from an end user perspective, can you show us how a representative would close out sales? I'm assuming we're talking about a sales representative. We have call center folks that may start the sales process, but the reps do not close out their own activity. That's a good, interesting, practical question. Let me cover that, especially when we get. You know what? I'm going to move on to other activities. So let's actually just talk about it. Let's go ahead and answer that question right now. So I hope that this is going to be responsive to this question. So let's say it is actually still September, and your call center folks have started set up pending sales within GoldMine. So those pending sales are likely to look something like this, where you've got a forecast in GoldMine. It's forecast, and the user on it, by default, when they schedule it, I don't know if you know this, when they schedule it, they can have the name of the call center person who created the call, or it can be the name of the actual sales rep who's going to be doing the follow-up. And either that might be assigned by the call center person, or it might be assigned by a sales manager, or somewhere else along in the process. You might, go ahead and actually change the name of the person who's going to be doing that follow-up. That would make perfect sense. By the way, that does not ruin your reporting as far as what did the call center people achieve, because you still have within each sale record not only the name of the person who's going to be doing the follow-up, who it's scheduled for, but also who created it. These are two different pieces of information, so that if we were to go in and rename this, that Tina is going to be the sales rep who finishes this sale, you can see in the actual underlying data, Tina is now the name of the person who it's scheduled for, but we still know who created it and what the date was that it was created on, and that might very well be the basis for a very good planning document for your call center, or sort of an examination or an assessment of what it is that people have accomplished. So don't feel like you only need to base these reports based on the user ID of the person that's assigned to. You've actually got who created it, and even who last updated the record, and when was it last updated. Sometimes that's useful as well. So that said, when the salesperson goes to make the call and sell it, then I would say that's when Tina is going to be actually closing out the sale by going to the record, going to the individual record here, completing that call on the date that the sale happens, and let's say in this case, I don't know, Tina didn't actually make the sale, Lori wound up making the sale, and the sale wound up happening in November, and with the result code and with their notes and so on, that would essentially finish up that sale, so that now it moves over from pending into history as a completed sale. It's actually a sale now in the future because I put a November date on there, but I think you can gather what I've gotten to. So that's the process basically. So I hope that answers the question. If it's not clear, please feel free to ask us individually afterwards, or even put in something in the question dialog there to just clarify that. But I hope that addresses the question of essentially from the end user perspective, how should they close out sales? When they do, by the way, here's what the result's going to be. In the cash flow, here's what the result's going to be. We just closed an $8,000 sale, and we closed it in November. So when I hit complete, we're actually going to see something else, an $8,000 sale show up in the one column under November. That is, and this is your assurance, by the way. This cash flow report, or this, your forecast sale report, whatever it is your assurance that what you thought happened in GoldMine actually did. The person did actually complete the sale it's it's under the right name, it's under the right product, and whatever it needs to be. This report verifies that what you thought happened, and if you really thought, well, wait a minute, that really should have been in October, not in November, easy enough to drill down on that, go back again to the actual activity, and here I'm using this. If I just double-click and drill down, it would go to the Los Angeles Lakers record, but if I click Edit Activity, it will actually pull up the sale itself, and I can say, well, yeah, actually that sale really happened today, so I'll change that date, go back to my report again, refresh it so that 8,000 now moves over into the October column, and there we are back how we should be. This level of data management, by the way, is just so hard to do if you don't have MasterMine. I hope that you're really making good use of your MasterMine to do this. Okay, so I talked about the drilling through and so on, managing that. The other thing that I wanted to do before we go over to activity monitoring as opposed to dollar monitoring was to talk about charting. Here is a very simple graphical presentation of by product, month by month, what our sales were for the year. And again, full cash flow, so it actually includes a projection of how the final 3 months of the year are going to be. Now, for the purposes of graphing like this, I'm going to actually go up here and clone this worksheet. Cloning it's nice because then I can go and play with this and figure out some other way of doing it. Maybe I'll take out the success detail here to just simplify the graphical view of this. Might also simplify it by hiding all the buttons. People like to not have buttons on the graph if they don't need it. And maybe, let's see, I think a sensible way of looking at this, now this is January through December for gadgets, January through December for widgets, and so on. That's one, potentially useful view. Another one might be something like this. January through December with our 3 different products within, or product categories within each month. Again, a useful thing, you can see a general trend for overall sales, but you also have it broken out by the individual products. Another useful way of doing this would be to just change the actual chart type itself. If I right-click, whoops, try that again, right-click and go to chart type, you might choose to stack the products all together to get an overall view for the company while still being able to differentiate by product category. Many different ways that you might want to use your graphs here. And I mentioned dashboards before. I'm not going to go through a physical demonstration of that, but you can sort of see where essentially creating some workbooks that have graphs like this in there is in effect the same thing as creating a dashboard. Where you might go further on it is to actually have a tab at the beginning of this workbook that aggregates all of the graphs from the different tabs onto one page, and once you save that and call it, when you call it back, you essentially are looking at a dashboard. I mean, you will have created a dashboard for yourself that might have 3 or 4 or 5 different graphs on it, each with its own meaning from different areas within GoldMine, but which are all just essentially like gauges for different parts of your GoldMine. To me, that's a very simple way to create a useful, let's say, sales management dashboard that tells you where you are at a glance, but also gives you the ability to get the further information that's underneath it by either drilling down or going to the appropriate tab that drives the graph that it comes from. Okay, so on the forecast and cash flow and completed sales aspect, I think that I've covered most of what I wanted to do here. It goes without saying, or it should be fairly obvious, that if you've got certain goals for certain months, it is certainly possible to go and by hand put in your actual quotas for those months and then make a comparison. It shouldn't be too hard to actually say, okay, we had a $10,000 quota here and 15,000 and whoops, and so on, and actually continue that down, and then do another column that does a difference, this is all available to you. This is something else that kind of surprises me when I talk to people and they don't realize, oh yeah, we could have actually just used the Excel spreadsheet here in a way that pulls information from the pivot table and compares it with the value on the regular spreadsheet to give us a result. Maybe this is just our gadget quota, so we'll take this one. And by the way, oh, okay, here's actually a learning moment. Now, if I do this, if I take that cell and subtract from it this amount, okay, so there's our difference. But this does not allow me an easy way to just sort of drag down, because what I'm really getting here is only each of these, I'm getting the quota, or excuse me, I'm getting that cell minus the quota for any given row here. What I really want is the cell in the same row minus what I'm on there. So to do that, what you want to do is actually get rid of this get pivot data function, which is a what I would call a hard reference within the pivot table. I won't go into that in detail, but there are ways to have it, only pull from the grand total of the pivot table, no matter where the pivot table moves. That's what the get pivot data function is for. In this case, what you really want is more of a straightforward formula. I want B10 minus F10, and I want to copy that right down the page here, so that I actually get, so that I understand what's the difference between what I had as a quota and my actual sales. Did pretty well. We had $1 million worth of sales here, 70,000 quota, but I mean, not realistic on the quotas there, but you can sort of see quickly how you can do your calculations like that. Okay, with the time that I've got left here, still open for some questions, but I wanted to do one other kind of a report here, and that is completed activities, calls and appointments. So I'm going to do a history report. Just I'm back in GoldMine now. I'm doing a history calls and appointments report. The purpose of this is I want to call this sales activity. And my purpose is I really want to see, let's say we're not doing forecasting completed sales in GoldMine, but we definitely are tracking calling activity or sales activity, whether it's visits, outgoing phone calls, whatever it is. I wanted to talk about this as well in terms of what did our actual line people accomplish during the year. Again, what we've got here is 2014 total calls, total appointments by user. That's, of course, just the default layout. We're going to be able to lay this out to answer just about any question in relation to that activity that we want to. I actually forgot where I was going with that, so I'll just continue on here. This, again, is very easy to show as a month by month by dragging the month field up to the top, or to specify, okay, really we're interested in the calls to start with here, so let's just go with calls. Oh, I know what I was going to say. What's important here is a couple of things. There's just the simple raw, hard number of how many calls did the person make. If you've been using GoldMine at a little bit higher level, you've got your users doing it at a little bit higher level so that they're actually, let's say, putting in result codes so you know whether not only how many times did they dial the phone, but did they leave a message or did they actually talk to somebody. You can put those refinements in here and actually know really, for example, how many companies, how many individual companies on average did sales rep X actually contact month by month for the year in the midst of all the work that they're doing. So in other words, clearing away all the other noise. If what I really think is my sales rep should be able to, let's say, develop a relationship with 100 new companies every year, and on average, I want them to shoot to develop a new relationship with 10 of them every year. These are obviously goals. Then we can set those goals, but also check the actual reality based on what is in GoldMine. What do we define as establishing a new relationship? Well, it could be just a completed call with a certain result code. So that when you establish that new relationship, you uniquely for that company, you set the result code as EST, establish the relationship. And then you could, for any given sales rep, or actually for your whole sales team here, you could actually see how many new prospect relationships were established month by month. How does that trend within individual sales reps? How do the sales reps compare with each other? How does the sales rep compare with themselves month by month through the year, or even something like this, year on year for the same month? Especially if you've got a seasonal kind of a business, it's useful to be able to drop the on year field in so that you can tell, okay, Nancy has fallen off considerably from the same month last year. Rob, congratulations here. Actually, let me take the year 2012 out of here so we're comparing apples to apples. Rob, went in May from 7 last year to 21 this year, but in June had more in June the previous year than he did this year, whatever. This is a good way to sort of see a year-on-year comparison for obvious planning reasons, but also for obvious personnel management reasons, to just be able to see this information and lay it out and show it to the user. Okay, we are getting to the very end of our 2 hours. I did want to leave just a little bit of time to do a drawing. As usual, you probably know that we try to do a drawing every month for our end user participants in this webinar to give something away. But just in case, Carnegie, anything else that we need to handle on questions before we do our drawing?
There's nothing else out there.
Okay. Fair enough. Let's go back. I'll leave up the GoldMine and MasterMine here just in case it's useful, but let's switch over to the drawing, and while you're getting ready, I will bring up this page here. So this is our drawing for a free 1/2 hour support session. You can use my time. Typically it's going to be my time that you're doing this with. It could be Chris, but for any of the purposes that we do support, online support for, that could be a little bit of report writing for you, digging into your GoldMine database. It could be data managing, updating, massaging, whatever is useful for you. Data analysis, which is where instead of creating a report that you're going to call back over and over again, be actually analyzing your GoldMine data. Or we might even back off and really talk about, well, how do I need to set up the process so that it feeds our reporting into a manageable kind of a system. That is advice that I think can sometimes be very useful from somebody like myself who's been using GoldMine for going on 20 years and has, even better, seen, I'm going to say by this time, thousands of GoldMine using organizations and knowing how they use it. Okay, so that's how you may use this free 1/2 hour. Carnegie, do we have a winner?
Let's see. Our winner today is Tara Rugg.
Tara Rugg. Okay, yeah. Tara, congratulations. Carnegie, how will we handle that? She should call you? Or you call her?
I will give her a call after the webinar.
Okay. And we'll schedule that 1/2 hour. Feel free, as I say, to use it for any of these purposes. For those of you who did not win the free 1/2 hour, consider engaging our help in October and November to support you in doing the analysis that you need to do to support your planning process. I'm going to throw up our last slide here, which is just contact information. Use this information to get the most out of your mastermind as you approach the end of the year. I should say the most out of your mastermind as well as out of your GoldMine. This is in some ways the most exciting time of the year for us because you've got great information available. It's really a matter of just deciding to harness it and put it to good use in support of your planning. So with that, thank you very much, Carnegie. Thank you all very much for attending our webinar today, and look forward to working with you as we go along and seeing you, I suppose, next month when we have another end user mastermind usage webinar.
Thank you, Rob.